Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Crystal Core Radio Podcast. Brian and Chris joining us today. Brisk It from the Infinite Podcast, who you've been so gracious and had me on your show several times. I'm so glad that we were able to get you in over here. We're going to be talking about Xbox. We're going to be talking about Avowed. That's been a big source of drama on the Twitters, the X's of the world, and I think ultimately. Like we probably all like share an agreement of 90% of it, but it ends up being something that you actually reached out and said, "Hey, let's talk about this." So we thought we would have you on now to kind of talk about that. Before we get into the Avowed conversation, though, there's been a ton of stuff going on in the world of Xbox over 2024, and now we're starting to see it accumulate in this everything's an Xbox and the whole marketing campaign. With this is an Xbox, this is an Xbox. I'd like to see how you feel now, because this is something where I felt like Xbox has been going for a long time. And I think, unfortunately, things got leaked and that caused a lot of consternation where they weren't ready for their marketing and their messaging. But how are you feeling now that we're looking down the barrel of 2025 with Xbox kind of gearing up to, start promoting their next console and everything is an Xbox?
So just to qualify, you're talking about the leaks with the 4 games?
Initially? Yeah, that's what that really kind of kicked off back in the spring. And, hey, it's just, we're only talking about these 4 games. And then it's been kind of a slow rolling of, we have Indiana Jones, which is now launching to critical acclaim. That's also been announced to come to PlayStation. Rumors still swirl that it's more games are coming to PlayStation. And PlayStation's and Xbox. Like that's where I see this going.
Well, there is definitely more games, 110%. I don't think anyone can sort of kid themselves at the moment. And around that 4 game sort of time, I found out that there's actually a Starfield port for PlayStation. Mm-hmm. People weren't happy that I said that, but it exists. When it comes, it comes. If you're talking about the marketing, look, it's too soon. Microsoft has this habit of having their finger on the pulse and jumping too soon. We saw it with TV, and I guess their focus was also off on that one. You can sort of point to that and say, hey, the focus was off because you're talking to gamers. Let's talk about games. But what they were talking about is where we saw the platforms go. PlayStation did it, Xbox did it. We all went that way. That's what happened. Everything was interlinked. It was a full system for your living room, right?
Everything also listens to you now. That was a huge thing where we're going to have Connect and it's going to respond to your voice. And people were like, I don't want anything listening to me. And now years later, I've got multiple Alexas, Google Chrome, Apple launched their listening in device, so
and we've all got webcams. We've all got laptops with just integrated webcam. All that stuff is just happening. And it was weird because I said that to my son the other day. It's like weird. Back in the day, everyone complained about Kinect being on all the time and listening to you. And it was fun when you were playing COD and you just said Xbox off and turned someone's Xbox off mid-game. That was great. But how do I feel about the everything's at Xbox? I think it's too soon. It's just way too soon. They're not set up for it. They don't have the store on Google. We can't buy games directly through that. Running a web app to do that, which I think they have access to, is a nightmare. There's no discovery for that. You have to sort of go to that thing, which is why they're using QR codes on bus stops. I don't know if you saw the post that I posted up earlier today, and they've got bus stops in Australia where they've said this bus stop is an Xbox and with a huge QR code.
That feels like somebody's making fun of them. Like you're going to scan it and it's going to take you to a video of a music video just mocking you.
They're like trolling themselves. So look, I don't think they don't have they don't have a handheld. They don't have, there's a lot they're not ready to do right now. And it seems like they're just jumping way too early. It also seems again like they're pushing us console players. You go back to the Indiana Jones announcement of PlayStation. That felt like a direct, I don't think I can swear on this show, but a direct FU to the Xbox console gaming community. Like that's, we're the guys that have brought the brand forward. Like they exist because we are here. Obviously it's mostly casuals, but we've been the ones that have sort of been the I don't know, kept pushing the Xbox sort of name. I guess we sort of do that. A lot of people make fun of that or whatever, call you a fanboy, but like, look, I love the ecosystem and I love everything about it. But it felt like a middle finger to us and a signal that you're not our focus anymore. So for me, it was negative.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I didn't see that announcement of Indiana Jones to be done the correct. When you gave it to Keeley, oh, dude. You know, and then the Xbox is everywhere. Is it? It's not fully integrated yet. So when someone says, "What's this Xbox everywhere thing?" and you're like, "Okay," so you got to go to your phone, you got to download this app, you got to do this, you got to sign in here, you got to pay this much for Ultimate, then you got to do this, then you got to do that, and then then you got this guy. Yep, now you're in. You know, and at the moment, I think they have just launched the Play Your Games Anywhere, which is if you own the game, you can play it on cloud.
This has been a huge thing that I've been waiting for, and it's been I think essentially because like I use a lot of GeForce Now, which I find that they've got that integrated with Game Pass Ultimate, so you see a bunch of those games show up on that platform. And when I'm playing on the xCloud platform right now with my games, I've been playing, like I said, in the pre-show, little Final Fantasy Pixel remasters. There's a noticeable quality difference between these two services. However, I'm still thrilled that I can finally launch these games that I own. I don't think it's every game yet. I think they're going to be rolling that out with more time. But that in and of itself was this thing that we've been waiting. Like it just felt like forever for. And it's like they did they had their showcase this year, which I thought like they knocked that out of the park, like 9.5 out of 10. Like it was entertaining. It was they showed off gameplay. Like at the end of the day, I was like, that was a great showcase. But then they didn't mention xCloud. That's what lost a 0.5 for me, because it would have been a perfect show if they talked to us about that, if they made that announcement. Even if at that show they said it's coming November 2024, which is when it showed up. It's like that would have been fine, because like you left me waiting. We literally did a podcast the week before it came out, and I'm like, and I was frustrated. I'm like, where are my games? Phil Spencer says they're coming, and then a few days later they're like, it's happening in November. I'm like, thank you. Why have I had to be frustrated about that all year long?
But it's only 50 games, and that's the other thing. It just feels like they're not ready. It's like any big I don't know if you guys work for a big company or work for a big company, and it just seems to be this thing where they have these ideas, these great initiatives that they're going to implement. And when they roll them out, they don't roll them out in a complete sort of way. For me, if I was them, I would make sure I've got my app ready, make sure all my ducks are in a row, and make sure that when someone boots up that experience for xCloud, I mean, for us as hardcore gamers, we're happy to go through the web browser or do whatever it is you need to do to get to it, right? And it's great on the Xbox. You know, if you don't want to check out a Game Pass game, but you don't want to download it, you jump in and jump out. I love that. Yeah. But this is an Xbox. It's too soon to be doing that advertising campaign. Get the app. Make sure you've got their owned games in the people's libraries in there for the hardcore gamers, and make sure it's easy and accessible. Which at the moment, I just don't feel like it is. I think it's way too soon.
When do you think it's going to be ready? Like, is this the next console 2026 kind of like? All right, we've got it. We're ready.
Yeah, I mean, is it going to be another Crackdown 3? Look, look, it's hard to say, but with what they have now, the infrastructure that they have, it's just sort of putting that team and putting that focus on it, I think. So, look, I would say 3 years. You know, another 3 years, new console launch. They should have everything ducks in a row. But who knows? This is Microsoft. They may be like, oh, this is not working. We're going to drop it. The other thing is that tech is moving exponentially alongside the cloud. So, you know, chips are getting smaller. Mm-hmm. There is a limit. We are sort of reaching that limit, but chips are getting smaller, you know, and cloud may not be the thing that you lean on. You know, iPhone 15s, you can download Assassin's Creed Mirage. You can download Resident Evil 4 and play that natively on your phone. We're not that far away from TVs sort of having that tech. You know, obviously it's not going to be at where a console is going to be at or where a PC is going to be at. You know, and then it could be cloud assisted. But yeah, look, I personally have been saying this for years. I don't see a future in cloud as a standalone thing. I see it more as an assisted, cloud assisted. You see it in COD. We're streaming in textures, that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I sort of see cloud going. But I mean, this is their focus. They probably know way more than me, but I think with the way that tech has sort of been moving, it's going to catch up to that cloud.
Yeah, I don't see cloud becoming the de facto only option for players, but you brought up a great point, especially about streaming. I've always, cloud compute, for example, is that when we talk about the every time the consoles come out, we haven't seen that jump from the Xbox One to the Xbox Series X, from the PS4 to the PS5 that we've seen in the past. So I thought that this generation was going to struggle no matter what, because people aren't going to be like, wait, you want me to spend $700 and I am getting an improvement, but I'm not getting the improvement that when I jump from the 64 to the PS3 or something like that, where you're like, oh my gosh, all this stuff is possible now. And so with that, when we look at the hardware as it exists right now, I was like, how can they do this without cloud compute in terms of making it cost effective? Because if it's not cost effective, people aren't going to purchase it. And we've seen that. I think we've seen that with the PS5 Pro right now, where it's on the shelves everywhere. I'm happy for those who got it, but I can't personally justify going out and spending that much money on a console right now. I'd rather spend that money elsewhere.
Yeah, well, look, I did a whole video and a bit of a breakdown of just looking at the tech that we have at the moment. And obviously it's R&D that goes on for years. So when they launched the Series X, they're already in full R&D on the next console. So, they make bets and they take gambles, hoping that what they've done is where and Microsoft's pretty good at that. So look, again, I did the breakdown. I just cannot see any next-gen console being below that $800 price tag. I can't see it. I do not understand how you would get it there. And if we, I guess what you're referring to is the tools, right? So, but they don't use them. This is the problem. Microsoft has a lot of tools that still to this day have not been used. They haven't used machine learning. They haven't used mesh shaders in full. I think a couple of games have. But there hasn't been many developers that have implemented all these things that are inside the box. The RDNA 2 stuff, they do use. But the bespoke things that actually Microsoft put into the box, they haven't used. And you can understand why. You're talking about a console that's in third place, which is not a bad thing. Talking about, I think they're up to 40 million sold now. You're talking about 40 million units moved. When you compare that to PlayStation's, I think they're up to 60, 70 or whatever it is. Or maybe even 100. I don't know what place. I don't really focus on the sales, like a lot of the PlayStation guys do. They love it. But when they're the biggest market share, that's what you're going to develop for. That's what you're going to be focusing on. Then you're going to be looking at PC, and then unfortunately, Xbox takes a bit of a hit. And you're not going to use those bespoke tools for a game that you're developing for all three platforms. Now, what's interesting is that we haven't seen the first party properly implement these tools. So it's interesting to see, these games coming out soon. The Coalition, I would argue, is probably maybe next to Playground Games, Xbox's best studio. So what they can do with UE5 and then implementing the tools in the box should be interesting. And also Fable should be interesting to see what they can do as well.
Yeah, it would be nice to see their first parties kind of lean into it. That's something that Nintendo does really well. Is, I don't know if that's built into the bonus structure or if it's just in the culture inherently, but it feels like when they develop something, they're willing to kind of lean in on it. And the Xbox studios, it's almost like, this is the company I work for now. Like, just tell me what shirt to wear to the convention. I might be here with a different shirt company next year. Like that loyalty doesn't feel, you don't feel it in their first parties. Like Forza Horizon is an Xbox game, but it doesn't have to be. Like, it would still be just as enjoyable on a PlayStation. It would be weird because I'm used to playing it in the Xbox, but there's nothing about that game that is intrinsically Xbox. And it would be neat to see it use some of the technology to kind of create a unique experience. I agree with you. I don't think they're ready. I don't think they're, and I get concerned that they're going to pull the foot off the gas on whatever the next Xbox is, because they don't have a standard naming convention. But whatever the next Xbox is, I get concerned that they're going to pull back on that, and they're going to go so hard in on cloud, and it's going to be this like Netflix Jake Paul fight type moment where, like, even if they're like, heaven forbid they're actually successful, because it's not even ready for scale. It's already hard to use, but heaven forbid we actually all agree to use it, and then it can't scale up. Like, they know how to do this. I can go to any store. I can come home with a comically large size cardboard box with way too much packaging in it. I can plug it into my TV and it functions. I don't know that Xbox Anywhere is going to deliver that same experience. And $800 is a high price tag. Many of us are getting phones are high price tags. Everything's a high price tag. So the price tag on its own, while it is concerning, everything is expensive, and Apple is expensive. Everything's expensive. So I don't know that price tag is a reason not to do something.
No, well, I don't think that's the thing. There's plenty of avenues for Xbox to go and push a bit harder. They had it everywhere. I can't remember the name of the program that they ran where you could pay your Xbox off. So you go to a phone provider, get your Xbox, and pay it off like you had a phone. It actually worked out being cheaper because you've got Game Pass. You didn't know that, but that was available in America as well. That was available in Australia. I didn't use it, but I thought that was fantastic. But they didn't push that initiative, and I think that could be an avenue for them to sell these more expensive boxes. The reason that I don't think that the reason that I think it's going to be $800 is they've traditionally been loss leaders, right? So they would sell that console at a loss and then make their money on the software. And at some stage through the cycle, the hardware would get cheaper. And then they would start making profit on the box as well. And that would happen later in the generation. We just have not seen that. Chip costs have gone up 6.1% since 2020. So the price of silicon is not diminished. It's in fact gone up. We've never seen that. We've never seen a console that got more expensive during its life cycle than got cheaper. So it's sort of unprecedented times. And I don't see Satya and Nadella saying, yeah, let's stick with this old system and we'll sell it as a loss leader and whatever. I see them shifting to PC, shifting to console, I guess going into a sort of a more third-party space, which I slightly lament, going into a more third-party space, and then selling that hardware like they would a laptop or like they would a phone, or they're like, this is the price, that's what it is, and if you want that premium experience, then you'll pay it. I see further down the line. I wouldn't be super concerned, because when you look at an Xbox, you talk about everything is an Xbox and this is an Xbox and everywhere is an Xbox. There is somewhere where this goes at a logical conclusion, and it's not something that when I say this, it's not based on just off the top of my head. There is some things that we've heard. So the Xbox is technically a virtual machine that sits in a container that is the Xbox, right? You can take that virtual machine out of the container and you could put it on a laptop. You could put it on hypothetically, you could put it on a phone. You could put it on a third-party developed console and sell that as an Xbox with higher specs. You could get a lower spec third-party console, and that Xbox container, I guess, we call it a hypervisor. The hypervisor would sit within that Xbox, so you would be getting the Xbox experience, just not from Microsoft. So I think that's where this sort of leads down the line. Yep, like yes, if they stop making consoles, I don't think they take the console away. I don't think the console goes away until we get to that diminishing returns point where it's in a TV. You boot up your TV and it's already as powerful as a 4090. I don't think we see consoles go away until we sort of hit that point. But how they deliver that console is possibly going to change.
Yeah, I do think the delivery is going to be interesting to see what changes. I'm very curious about the price, because I do agree with you from an analysis perspective, especially when you factor in inflation. Because if you look at even the PS5 Pro with its $700 price point now, that is still actually very cheap comparative to what consoles used to cost when adjusted for inflation. And so it's nowhere near the most expensive system ever released. And so when you start thinking about that $400, $500 price point, well, that's actually like $150, $200 back in the 90s and maybe even the early 2000s. So we've seen obviously that changed. And so a part of me just wonders what's going to give. I've made the same kind of, I've brought up the same kind of question when it comes to subscription services. Chris talked about how he's playing the latest World of Warcraft and also playing Final Fantasy 14. Those games have the same subscription cost that they did 20 years ago. Like that has not gone up, despite the fact that you already mentioned it. Silicon's gone up in price. Everything's gone up in price. And so it's like at some point, something in my mind has to give. Either the players have to say like, yeah, we're okay with $700, $800 for a console because we get that value out of it. Or they're just going to have to be like, well, you can have it. It's an option, but you don't need it because you can also do these other things if you really want to play games. And I think that's actually like you said, like you kind of put it perfectly. Microsoft is not ready, but they're also thinking ahead of the game. And we've seen this with every console, with TV, like you brought up with the Ethernet on the original Xbox. So a lot of people were giving them pushback for that. They're like, the Ethernet, it's not a big thing yet. And it's like, it's going to be. So let's be ready for when it is. And so I do think that your analysis is spot on. They're not ready, but they're also thinking that, yeah, why not fire up your TV and play our games? Why not? Who cares? Like, as long as you're buying our games and you're spending time in our touching this at all, we're winning, because I think essentially something's got to give. And I do wonder if it's going to be the cost of the console. Do you think Steam is coming to the Xbox platform?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think Steam, Itch, Epic, I think they're going to open that system up. How that's going to work, I don't know. A lot of people will push back on that. Yeah. And talk about percentages, so, what will Steam's cut be and what will Xbox's cut be? And if you can just buy everything on Steam, why would you buy everything on Xbox? But there's always a deal to be done.
Yeah.
There was always a deal to be done. There's always money to be made. And I don't see Steam knocking back, opening up another 40 million systems. And if you talk about, there's a lot of games on Steam that maybe they could play on Xbox One. They could do some sort of a cloud, a change to the Xbox Ones where they open up that platform as well. So you can access games on the Xbox One. Then you're talking about 100 million systems, right? But if you're opening up the ecosystem to 40 million systems as Gabe, I don't think Gabe's going to knock that back, Right. So I'm sure that there will be a deal to be done. That's money he's not going to make unless he does that deal. So if he loses a little bit on the back end, he's actually gaining. So you got to think of it like that. I think as a business, you would. How they do that,
it could literally be done behind the scenes, because Xbox, they take the 30% over on Steam. It could literally be like, how about y'all take 15%? Like where the end user, nobody ever sees anything. There's no public announcement of it. It just happens. And it's like, oh yeah, now we've got, of course, Microsoft's going to keep their games on Steam. That's where people want to buy it on PC. And then, now Steam, if I think that's going to be an interesting thing where maybe Microsoft is that trade. Instead of 30%, we say 15, call it a day. Like that's so much money, especially when you consider just how many numbers these games do.
And you really get that cross integration of gamers. Then you're sort of crossing the PC market with, which it already is, the PC market very much with the Xbox players, and that already exists, but even more so. Then everybody's in each other's ecosystems. I'm sure there's probably, there's obviously those Steam players that are the PC Master Race type guys that wouldn't touch the Xbox launcher, but I'm sure that there's a few that were out there going, look, I'm not going to buy COD this year. I'm just gonna get Game Pass and I'll boot it off the launcher and I'll play it like that. So
I don't know.
I think you're right.
And I don't know if the data backs this, but I feel like in Call of Duty, I see a lot more paid skins this time, and I see a lot more evidence that an account has a battle pass assigned to it than typically in Call of Duty, where a lot of us, we pay for a $70 game, and I'm not going to pay for cosmetics in a game that's going to expire annually when I already paid $70 just to get in the door. And I do wonder if they were able to A, increase the number of Game Pass subscribers, and B, a lot of these gamers, especially if Call of Duty is your primary game, I can imagine myself, let's go back in time. I have the amount of time that I would in winter break from college. I've just now gotten a game for free in a subscription that maybe my parents help with, or I'm already used to paying. That battle pass and all those cosmetics don't feel like a big jump. I didn't buy any, but I understand it. I understand why I'm seeing the amount of cosmetics that I'm seeing. So I'm wondering how this Call of Duty will do financially, if they even decide to share that.
I mean, I did. I bought I call it the Bruce skin. I don't know if you guys have seen the shark. Fish are friends, not food.
Yep.
If you've seen Nemo, you know that. I mean, I bought that. But when was the last time you jumped into a COD? Was that is it been fairly recent? Or are you in every COD? Are you a massive COD player?
I play probably 2 out of 3.
So the last one I spent a little time on was Modern Warfare 2, the remake. But I also left with Modern Warfare 2. Like that was the last one before they had the whole Respawn and Infinity Ward shakeup. And I was like, I'm gonna go check out Titanfall. And I took a break pretty much from that until Black Ops. I think they're on 6 now, but it was the previous Black Ops that I went and checked out a little bit, and then I stepped at more. And then into Modern Warfare 2 when they remade it, I was like, oh, this is so great. I skipped 3 because I don't know why, I was just not really feeling it. And then the fact that they brought the game to Game Pass, that's why I played it. And I'm like, this is great. I've actually stepped into the campaign a little bit. I've been doing the multiplayer a little bit, and it's been great. And it's like, I don't think I could have purchased the game because if you were like, guys, we're all going to play it, I'm like, maybe I've got all these other games that I'm enjoying right now. But the fact is that with Game Pass, I was like, of course I'm going to play it now. Like it literally just removed that barrier for entry. And I'm happy that I got to play it because I think it's actually one of the best CODs that I've played in a very long time.
It's pretty crisp.
Yeah.
I don't agree with all modes on all maps, but it's pretty good.
Well, I'm a huge COD player. So if you, it was a few years ago, and I was a pretty much Battlefield player flat out from 3 until 1. Like I very much stuck to that. I did buy my CODs and play my CODs as well. But I was very much a Battlefield player. But I was pretty surprised to see when they did the Xbox Museum, which was a while ago now, I think back in 2021, when I booted that up, my most played game ever was COD. Like as a franchise was COD. I didn't realize that. But I'm like, well, I guess I do play it every year. But look, Modern Warfare 2019 was fantastic.
Yeah.
When they launched that Black Ops Cold War, I did not like that. I thought it was absolutely terrible. It was a step back graphically, a step back like gameplay wise. A lot of people did disagree with me and they loved the multiplayer. I just did not. This one, Modern Warfare 2 again was fantastic. 3 was, look, let's forget that 3 existed.
I think that was a victim of the uncertainty of the Activision Blizzard deal. Like, because it seemed like, okay, well, all right, it's getting delayed till October. Okay, well, let's go ahead. As opposed to like, because Phil Spencer's publicly commented that it's the fact that it's a yearly franchise. He's like, I don't think it needs to really be a yearly franchise. You could, really kind of support that like they seemingly are doing with the current model, where it's actually Call of Duty, and then you just choose which stuff you want. It's its own platform.
It feels like I'm booting up the Call of Duty space, and I can scroll between games, and my purchases in theory would carry, which make cosmetics make a lot more sense to me. And make collector's editions and extra skins and all of these different and little emblems and stickers. And like this time around, when you prestige, they give you these emblems from previous Call of Duties. And that's kind of like this cool callbacks. If you could, I don't know, let me put stickers on my guns that I've earned in other Call of Duties. Like it starts to really encourage you to kind of be familiar with the whole franchise, which I like a lot about this Call of Duty.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if the cosmetics are transferable though.
That
would be that would be a fantastic idea. That to do that and to make it into a platform, but I just don't see that happening. You heard it was their biggest COD. We're talking about, if that's their biggest COD, Modern Warfare 2 sold 1 billion, I think, in the first 10 days. Right. So if that's their biggest ever sales, they said sales were up 60%. So you plus 60% onto 1 billion,
and that's on top of Game Pass being there for people who, like me, that wasn't going to check it out.
Their biggest kick in Game Pass subscribers, Satya said, I wish they would just give the numbers on these things.
Yeah.
I would be interested to know what the numbers are. Like, I'm not like these guys who would just jump on the internet and lord numbers over people like it's their company. But it'd be interesting to know, so we could have this discussion with in a more technical or analyze it a little bit closer. But they're saying that it's their biggest jump ever. They're saying 60%. You can work that out from 1 billion. So I don't see them stopping that yearly release. Or what I could see them doing is going back to a biannually release of COD, because I think there's money to be made in supporting that release for 2 years minimum.
Yes. I agree. Yeah. That's something where it's like, oh, and then they can do that with, like, it's the same thing where I'm, like the reason why we haven't seen Madden or these sports games that are yearly become that platform is because people are so easily happy to pony up. But now with battle passes and cosmetics and things like that, I think we're seeing a shift in people's buying habits to where, yeah, I'm not going to buy that yearly release game, but I would buy the battle pass. I would, hey, that has a big update that they put marketing behind. People come and check it out. I don't know. It will be interesting to see if Microsoft pulls that off. And I guess we'll have a good vision of what that looks like if they do decide to put out another COD in the fall. And if they do, then, well, I guess for the short term, at least, they're going to be sticking with the yearly. But if we see them say, hey, yeah, Black Ops 6, new mode, we're adding this to the battle, battle royale mode. We're doing like all that stuff. Come check it out. New zombie, like, who knows? I'm very curious to see how that plays out.
If the numbers are that big, they're not going to stop. I'm just optimistic that we would. I like Phil's vision when he spoke about it being something that we could support more fully and being less of an annual transaction. And it just felt like this FIFA type thing where, like, it just felt like it's a great game and it's a great community and you're being taken advantage of because you want to be a member of it. And so, like, I would like to see it become something with more staying power, but at 1.6 billion annually, keep doing what you're doing.
I mean, is the community great though? You ever opened up those lobbies and talked to any? Oh, I don't know. Maybe they're different in Australia.
That's fair. I just mean, like, it's active, right? I can hop on a game at any time. It's vibrant. Yes, the first thing I do before I boot up Call of Duty is I boot up a party, even by myself, just because I don't want the off chance that it puts me in voice chat with anybody. So I am in a party alone so that it automatically overrides game chat because I don't want it. I don't need it. I would rather play in silence.
Oh yeah, I remember when I was younger, it's like, oh yeah, hanging out in those lobbies, meeting people. And then there's still people that I've met in old lobbies that were friends online today. We get together and play games on occasion. Now, as an adult, I'm like, I don't need to talk to strangers.
No,
I've got a friend group. We're good. They're all playing games. Let's go.
I mean, I'll be honest. We don't really talk to them. Those lobbies are just everyone's going at it, man. Like you play a round of headquarters and you all come into a lobby for 2 seconds. The abuse flies around and then you back into your game. Look, it's like sports, man. Back in the day when I used to play an American sport, when I used to be in baseball, softball, I'd play one season, one in the off season. The trash talk that you would do to put people off their game, like that is just sort of quintessential to baseball. I don't know if you're allowed to do that sort of stuff anymore. But
I played baseball, and I played for a Catholic university, and the priests and the monks would all come out and watch, and I'd get in trouble because, like, I had this like super foul mouth. Like, it was just like running it. Like, all right, let's go. And so I was like,
I mean, I used to fill in catch. So most of the time I was in center field, but like I used to fill in catch, and it, like the mom jokes, is that your mom on the sidelines? She look good, man. Real good.
I don't like that
she
lipstick.
Got anything, she got anything in red she can wear next time? You'd be like, shut up, dude. Do stuff like that.
Those are good times, man. See, and that's the thing. Like, I don't know. Like, when you can opt out of something, I equate those kind of chat lobbies is the same thing with global chat in an MMO. Like, yeah, some people aren't going to like it and they can opt out of that. But I find it as just this, feed of entertainment that really makes, when I'm fishing in an MMO, something incredibly enjoyable just to sit, look and read and see what people are saying and going like, I wonder if that's going to be a ban. You're just like, oh yeah. So I don't know. I find it as a form of entertainment in these things. It doesn't, I don't know, but I'm different. My wife wishes things made me upset. She wishes I was offended by certain things. And I'm like, all right.
My sense of COD community is, can I hop into a game and play Call of Duty? That's what I want. And because a game like that, if you add wait times, Call of Duty is a substantially worse place. The idea that I can hop into any mode at any time of day or night, and there is immediately an entire group of strangers to fill in for anybody I didn't bring with me is awesome. And that's what I want. I don't need any of the chat. That's fine.
But I mean, they even sort of tried to bring this. I miss those old days. When you jump into a Halo lobby or whatever, and everyone would talk to each other because the default was that you had that chat on. And now I used to say, like, wouldn't it be cool back in the day if we had what we call now proximity chat? Like, if you got closer to someone, you could hear them talking, because everyone used to talk back then because it was sort of the new thing. But now everyone just look. You can jump into COD lobby and there'll be 1 to 2 dudes talking, and usually it'll be trash talk, and then everyone else is just sitting silently doing exactly what you're doing, like not listening to people talk.
I thought COD used to have that. Didn't COD used to have proximity? Like, right after you killed them, you got to hear their comms.
Yeah, it does. Yeah,
they're dying. Death, yeah.
When I used to not play as quietly as I do now, it was nice to like pop somebody in the head and then like hear them go, "Oh, son of a," and then like it cut off, and you're like, "Excellent, excellent." That's exactly the feeling I was trying to put in your life.
It still has that. It still has that. I had a guy who I was just.
Cool. I've opted out. I'm off in my own.
He was unlucky the other day, and because look, I'm not terrible at the game. I'm not a pro, but I'm not bad. And there was this dude, I was just wrecking him, and he was getting really frustrated. And it's great, you love it. He's like, God, it cuts off.
No, Call of Duty has a finite amount of fun in a lobby. So if you're having fun, the other team is not. Like, it is fun to be taken and claimed, because there is one amount that when the countdown starts, they've pushed out into the lobby, and then you need to go get it. It is not to be shared.
No, definitely. Yeah, look, COD's probably one of my all-time top games. Yeah, and I think they've done a fantastic job with this one. They can and they should support this one for at least 2 years before they move into the next one. I guess there is a world in which they do turn it into that full live service Fortnite game, but with those figures, I just do not see. I don't see them giving up those yearly sales or those biannually sales, of over $1 billion in you're already making back the money that you spent on Activision. I don't know, but then again, you got to talk about like what it costs to develop that game. Like, what are they spending on that game to develop it? Like, it is a lot, every year.
I think it's up to $300 million. So $300 million to turn around $1.6 billion. Yeah, I'd write that. All right, we'll go. But then you have, go ahead.
But is it like, look at Spider-Man 2? Spider-Man 2 was 300 million, and look at the. I don't know if that's comparable in development work. You're dealing with server issues and multiplayer, and I think there's a lot more to COD than there is development work. They're not comparable, but that's my point, right? One's a single player game that you can curate, and then the other one has things going on that you just can't control.
Right, but it's also monetized. That one is monetized continually, as opposed to Spider-Man, which is the one you buy it and you're done. They even announced with Spider-Man 2 there's not any DLC, so it's like, all right, that's it. Okay, that's the price. And Spider-Man 2 also has the thing of you got to pay Marvel's cut as well on top of all of that. So you have to move units, and I think Spider-Man 2 has actually struggled a little bit, and that's actually one of the games that I've seen people point to. Let's get to our main topic, because we were originally going to be talking about Avowed. This last couple of weeks has seen, especially over the Thanksgiving weekend, to catch everybody up to speed. The art director has been making some public statements. The gamer gators out there have gotten onto that and have highlighted this game as one of the potential woke games that are out there that should be avoided and boycotted. And we're seeing what I've defined as a very similar pattern with some of these games. Again, a pattern doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be one way or the other, but there's just this, kind of systematic kind of approach where we see these game developers get frustrated and then they start lashing out at gamers, which only then within the cycle of social media, I think fuels in and of itself, feeding the content for generations to come. But I tweeted out, if the pattern holds, I think, there's a potential this is going to be another woke nightmare, and which that obviously from just the phrasing alone got a lot of attention over on X, and one of the things that you replied to. So what are your thoughts about all of this? Because 2024 has been very interesting to see in terms of just the numbers alone.
So really, this topic's really, really interesting. It's one that I haven't spoken on much because I just didn't want to get into it.
Yeah.
A lot of people will assume that if you do that you don't have an opinion or that you're afraid to talk about it. It's a bit of a rabbit hole, and I just never really wanted it to do it with my content. But more and more, it's becoming one of those things that it's becoming such a thing that, if you're in gaming, you end up talking about it. So when you say woke, I sort of hate calling it that. And I'd like to call it what it is, which it is American communism. That's exactly what it is.
You're spot on. Yeah. I also hate the word, but people hear it and kind of can at least
know
get
what it
to
means.
A logical understanding of what it means. But it's also so vague because I've seen, and rightfully so, pushback of you have these people just labeling everything with that. And it's like, no. Let's actually call it what it is. But please continue.
Yeah. So just to qualify that so that the audience understands what I say when I say American communism is, and I don't want to give you guys a history lesson, but very briefly, communism failed horrifically. And all the communists in America, they saw that in the 60s, in the 50s and 60s, they saw that communism was failing, the great dream. It failed. And so some people let go of it. And then some people didn't. And they went back to the drawing board and thought about what they could sort of, how can we rework this so it sort of works within our society? Because Americans have this thing where they don't want to cut down the tall poppy. They want to be the tall poppy. They see success and they want to be success. It's not something that you can't take Americans apart by using a class system, but you can do it with an identity system. And so basically what they went back to the drawing board, and instead of having classes like the upper class, they're the elites, they're the problem. Now it's the privileged, the guys who have always, typically these are the bad guys, I hate to say it, but it's like you white guys, these are the bad guys. And then everyone else falls into a bit of a victim hierarchy, basically, of how badly they've been victimized by the white guys, in the course of history. That's my understanding of it. And then all of this follows. This is all of everything that's happening sort of in the gaming community, and you see in politics, and all of what's happening is what follows from that line of thinking. But this is the thing. There's been a full overcorrection in America, and it's happened across the West. Like a lot of people say, you don't understand, you're in Australia. I'm like, dude, it happened here, not on the level that it's happening over there, but it happens here too. Yep. There's been a full overcorrection, and my issue is then people that are on one side become hypersensitive. There's obviously I call them grifters, because if we talk about grums, talk about guys like Hypnotic, to me they're just focusing on the hate. And a lot of people get pissed off about me saying that, but that is what they're doing, and they don't have the intellectual chops to deal with what's going on in the gaming space and talk about it. But people are angry.
Clarify the term though. Just like, are you implying that they don't believe what they're saying? Because like, I know there's been some back and forth on the term grifter. I just would be curious.
I would loosen up the term a little bit, but yeah, typically it has been that they don't believe what they're saying. I would say you're leaning into that. You're leaning into the controversy. You're like, that's what you're building your channel on. That's what you're building your personality on. And then when you do
you're
that,
optimizing for the algorithm in that regard.
The tendency is to go hyperbolic. And then the tendency is to not be able to have a more nuanced conversation about it. And that's what bothers me, is that these guys are not these guys are not qualified to have this. I'm not qualified to have this conversation, but these guys are I'm sorry, based on what I've seen from them, they're way less qualified to have these conversations. And then it draws in a specific crowd too, which is not helpful. And that's not to say that they are part of that specific crowd. And that's the problem. That's the thing that bothers me, is that specific crowd. We'll just say people who are bigots. And that's probably maybe the 2%. And you see that 2% on Twitter, and that turns that conversation radioactive. And makes it very difficult. One side digs in and says, if you believe XYZ, you're a bigot. And then the other side digs in and says, if you believe XYZ, you're a woke, ideologically captured idiot. And that's there's just no room for the conversation. And I sort of float in the middle, and I say I'm a centrist. And what that means is that the left ran so hard to the left that they left me in the middle. I'm probably slightly right. I'm probably slightly right of center. So Avowed, just to qualify where I sort of sit, because a lot of people.
That's a really good qualification. Yeah, go ahead.
A lot of people will be like, you don't have an opinion. And I'm like, oh, I do. Or what you've got to add is not relevant. I don't see a problem with pronouns in a game at all. I think that's fine. If you want to include 1% of people, I'd say 1%, it's 0.6% of people in America. And provide them with options in a game to choose what they want to be called, fine. It's no skin off my teeth. Like that doesn't hurt me. And however, there is caveats to this. So people see that, and yeah, well, that's a different thing, Rick Tone. People see that, and let me just respond to that. Like, if someone's not hurting someone in their life with their choices and what they want to do, I don't have a problem with it. If you're not hurting anyone, then fine. It's the ideological beliefs around a lot of this that can do damage to minors. And I guess maybe we'll get into that. I don't know how deep you want to go. But when it comes to just having pronouns, that is not the slippery slope where we end up somewhere where we don't want to be. That does not, X does not always add up to Z, or Y. You know what I mean? Like, it depends on where it gets taken, and that's up to the adults in the country to handle that stuff, which they haven't. Now, I understand the caveats of this. I understand if you see that in a game, the first thing you're going to do, and I do it too. It's not like I'm not sitting there going, "Oh, okay." I do. Where does this go? Look, I know a couple of people that have played it, and it's just not one of those games. So I'm going to be pretty happy. Look, if you want to go back to Dragon Age Veilguard, I didn't buy it. I saw those conversations.
Were you going to? Did you buy all the other Dragon Ages? Okay. Just a lot of times in these conversations, I see people saying they're not going to buy it, but then we're not separating out the people who literally didn't even know the game was coming out anyway, and they've just now latched onto this controversy. Be like, "Oh well, I wasn't going to buy this thing, and I wasn't."
And I've stated this multiple times. I wasn't planning on picking it up anyway. I was like, well, maybe we'll see what it's about. And then the more information came out, I was like, I'm not. I said 2024. I wasn't hurt by any of these. I wasn't going to play any of those games anyway. So me boycotting or me just sitting on my wallet was effortless, because I was like, all right.
I've been so busy this year. It looks like I boycotted all games, and that's not
right. It's the hardest one for me though was Dragon, and I've stated this, and I know I will pick it up eventually, but at a discount, was Dragon Quest 2D HD remake, is because the devs themselves said that they were being forced to make these changes due to this ideology. And I was like, well, if they didn't come out and say that, it's like, yeah, I think I could have probably just, because the whole game has gender throughout it. It's just only in your creating of the character. But I was like, yeah, the fact that they were venting frustration and then that had to get yeeted off the internet, which never really is truly gone. I was like, well, I guess I can sit on my wallet and I can pick it up and play it later. I got enough to play anyway.
Yeah, nothing's truly ever off the internet, is it?
No.
So
Okay.
look, I wasn't excited for Dragon Age because I played a little bit of Inquisition and I couldn't deal with the combat the way it sort of ran. And then when they announced, I was like, meh. When it was like Dreadwolf, it was called Dreadwolf. I was like, meh, I don't really care. Then they showed it and I'm like, oh, I might like this. This is action sort of adventure type RPG. That's up my alley. And then I was like, okay, this is looking good. And then people played a little bit of it. I think there was a early previews and they were talking really positively about it. And I was like, okay, this might be okay. Then they started to I think I watched Skill Up's review. And one of his phrases was, every conversation feels like HR is in the room. And I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, no. And it's not just, this is the thing, you got to separate out the two and understand what's happening and why you're not liking something. So that game was written like it's in modern times. You're playing an RPG, it doesn't have the same feel. It doesn't have the feel of an RPG. Based on what I've heard, the early initial parts of that sort of world building and story beats is bad. Like, it's just poorly written. And I've spoken at length to people, and I haven't played the game. And look, I could be wrong on all this because I haven't played the game, but I have watched a lot to see if I wanted to. And I have spoken to people who were playing the game at the time and have played the game and bounced off a lot of my thoughts. Now, listen, that one particular conversation about the pronouns in that game, my thing is, and I'm going to swear, so apologies. I'm like, don't fucking tell me how to conduct myself in the world. Like, don't tell me how to do that. You're a video game. Who do they think they are that they are going to, I'm not a teenager. I'm not a child. If that's what you're directing your game at, like, then cool, make a game for that age group, but you won't make it. This is not the game for that age group. It never really has been. So why are you trying to teach me how to behave in the world? And then on top of that, like, why are you trying to teach my teenager how they should behave in the world? Like, don't do that. Your job is to entertain me. Your job is not to educate me. And so I really did not like that. It just fully bothered me, and I don't want that in a game. And then this feeds into a lot of things. Mm-hmm. So if you are hiring specific people to ensure that sort of stuff is in your game, are they the best story writers that you could find? Or was there someone else available who would have written a better story for Dragon Age? There's a lot of that. When you've got to think of the knock-on effects of how these things happen. And listen, like, I'm also someone who will say that DEI is not, at its essence, a bad thing. It depends on how you do it. Like, you cannot sit there and dictionary quote those words to me, say diversity is bad, equity is bad, and inclusion is bad. Like, none of those things are inherently bad. They're just not. Like, if someone's sort of sitting there, so DEI is bad, I'm like, do you understand the words? Do you need a dictionary? Shall we have a conversation about what is actually, so technically by the words, they're not bad. It's my Xbox talking to me. But the way that is implemented is misguided, and it has knock-on effects, and it creates things that we see now in entertainment, that we see now in politics. And yet, look, I really don't like I don't mind class-based, but I really don't like group-based politics, identity politics. I don't like grouping people into a segment. I'm not going to say I'm colorblind, and if I see a black dude, I don't see a black dude. I see an individual, but like, I see a black dude, but I don't think anything. Do you know what I mean? Like, when someone walks past me that's a different color, I don't register that as anything other than sort of someone walking past me as a normal human being in the world.
Right.
And I think they need to, but again, I think that we need to hold space. Oh my God, did you see that interview with the Wicked guys?
I've avoided that because I heard that's the worst part. We went and saw Wicked, me and the girls, and I was like, I love musicals, so I was like, this is amazing. And everybody's like, oh, have you seen these interviews? And they're like, they're horrible. I was like, no, I don't want to ruin the movie experience by the marketing. And that in a way kind of almost goes hand in hand with what we saw with even like Veilguard. You have David Jaffe coming out talking about how all the negative people, you know, like they've hurt the game or they ruined the game, or and then people kind of, I think, maybe I misinterpreted, but interpreted his words that it was those guys that made the game bad. And it was like, no, the developers, they made the bad game. And it, you know, and I would say, like, especially because I agree with pretty much everything you're saying, that's really spot on. But I'm also like a part of let the open market decide. If the open market wants that as a feature in the game, well, you go vote with your wallet, or you don't. But Game Pass is also an interesting factor here, because if they make Avowed and it's a good game, all the anti-woke, it's just going to be serving as marketing. We saw it happen with Hogwarts, like on that side of the spectrum. And I've been just wondering, when are we going to see that game that actually is good, that does tap into the culture war, and where the anti-woke end up making it, you know, even more successful because the attention that it's brought.
Yeah, I mean, well, that hasn't happened.
Hasn't happened yet.
Like they've been wrong about games. Like, been wrong about the majority of the games that they've dumped on before they've come out. Like, and this is another problem. It used to be
Which ones?
absolute cardinal. Oh God, Zhao's one. Have you played Zhao?
No, I haven't.
Tales of Godzilla, awesome game. It's an indie game. That's the actor from Assassin's Creed Origins, Abubakar Salim. I think he's also in Game of Thrones, the new one,
the Dragon, the House of the Dragon. Yeah,
I don't watch any TV. I just play video games. But it was really good. And there was nothing about that game. And look, I did speak to him in the background, genuinely, like just as this was cracking off, because I wanted to ask the question. And he came out and publicly said it. So I don't feel, I'm not like throwing out our public DMs into the public, but private DMs in the public. But, you know, he was like, literally, he knew, because one of the guys from Sweet Baby Inc. Was a Ubisoft employee, and they were a Ubisoft employee while he was at Origins, and she was a story writer, and he did not know how to write a story for a video game. He had no idea. He's like, how do I stagger this, and how do I deliver it so that it makes sense within the context of the video game? And he was looking for help from not just Sweet Baby Inc., but from like a lot of different people who he had bumped into. And he credited that everyone that he asked for help, and he didn't even use any of her advice, because by that time, when she got back to him, it was too late. But she did get back to him, so he credited them in the game. He credited everyone in the game that he asked for advice for, because it was a smaller game. And they beat up on that game mercilessly, man. And it just wasn't. It just wasn't that. Like, that's
what made me kind of angry, and I tweeted about it and ended up, you know, it's like where I always say, like, it's fun because, you know, you said the left ran so far to the left that everybody else just like all of a sudden you're like, I'm in the center now, you know, like, but everybody is now far right in that regards, and it's like being called far left and far right by depending on your perspective. I was like, that feels like I'm, if nothing else, being intellectually fair and open for these type of discussions. But I ended up going on Hypnotic's show, and he was, you know, trying to break down kind of my core arguments that I've made. And I was like, no, like, guys, leave the guy alone. Like, I don't get, like, I get it algorithmically. So the content creator in me completely understands why things go the way they go. Because also I completely understand the thing that a lot of people say they want isn't the thing they show up and support. So there's a lot of talk about like, oh, I really wish somebody would make a video like this. Cool, that video exists. Nobody watched it. Versus, okay, this is what is going on. This is what is algorithmically going to benefit me. And if that is your goal, to be a, you know, like a full-time content creator where that is your lifeblood, it's like, well, I wouldn't have children on that plan, but I understand how the game is played. I just don't want to play that game, you know?
No, neither do I. No, definitely not. Neither do I. And it's, yeah, for me, making content is a side gig that's is more fun. Like, I just enjoy the whole everything about it. Like, There is some drama that comes with it, obviously, but I mostly just enjoy the whole space. So this is why I did it. And I'm not around for clicks. I'm around to have good, honest, genuine conversations about things. And I think, with those guys like Hypnotic, it's you're not. There goes the nuance out the window. Here comes the overcorrect. Here comes the everything that they say about you, you're making it true by going after those particular games. And when you go after, by the time we even got to Avowed, I'm not listening to Grumps and I'm not listening to Hypnotic. For anyone I think that's got half a brain, like they're like, these guys are just going to go. Apparently it's happening with Indiana Jones now. They're just going to go after every game. But getting back to Avowed, you did mention Game Pass. So it's very interesting that it is in Game Pass and people get to try the game out, and that could be the success for this. I think that's where it has a little bit of an extra shield to this sort of stuff, because people be like, I'm not going to buy that game now but I do have Game Pass, so I'll just check it out. And when they dive into the game and realize that it's not even a thing. Look, I spoke to someone who's played it, and he said like that he jumped in, he noticed that they were there, but it wasn't a huge feature or anything. He just did his character creator and then went on with the game. And that's the last he saw or heard of anything that you would consider, quote unquote work. So yeah, to me, I think it's going to be a non-issue when it comes out. But this is the other problem with the internet, that people cannot be wrong. And so they cannot come out and retract what they were saying. Like, they have to win that battle. Like, I have to be right. So you will see Hypnotic and Grums try to hunt down something in that game. I can guarantee you that them and their army will go and hunt down something that they consider, and then they'll highlight that. And I just removes this nuance from the conversation. It's just really disappointing to see the gaming community do this. And on the other side of the coin, and I'm going to swear again, I fucking hate Alyssa McCante. That woman is just an absolute moron. Just an idiot, a complete idiot. And she does not help the space in any way, shape, or form. All she does is rile up the community and get them more feverish and fever pitched. And the attacks, maybe they do come at her, but those attacks, that anger then spreads out to the community, and it hits developers, and it hits anyone who just gets in the way of this movement. And it's just not the way to it's not the way to have these conversations and behave and to resolve the problem. Taking it back to Zhao, how often had you heard before this, got to the fever pitch that it's at now, I don't want that stuff in my games. And if they want to put that, why don't they just make their own game? And Zhao's not in the trans sort of community sort of side of things, but obviously there's people of color that want representation of games, and absolutely.
Yeah, and he's also making an original IP, his own story, as opposed to hey, we decided to gender swap or race swap, or we took this beloved character and we've changed them completely. Which honestly, I've never actually even been bothered by any of that. They changed out the Little Mermaid, for example. I thought it was great. I was like, all right, cool. I just don't care. Well, if you don't like it, that's a perfectly fine response to it as well. But I'm just like, I've never been personally bothered by that, because I've also never been I need somebody to look like me, and especially ginger based. It's I only had South Park, growing up. So it's just I had one.
Well, no, you had the Little Mermaid too, right? Because she was ginger.
Oh yeah, she was ginger, yeah.
But for me, it's don't mess with beloved characters. Ariel
that can be fun.
Is a beloved character. If we got Ryan Gosling to play Blade, do you think that would just go under the radar?
Oh, I wouldn't like that. Yeah, I guess that's fair. I wouldn't like that. I'd be like, what are you doing?
Yeah. No one would like that. So I just think leave beloved characters alone. But when you see a new IP and from a new studio, and if you play the game, Prince of Persia is obviously a much better game. It's made by AAA studios. But if you can think of the Prince of Persia side-scrolling Lost Crown, the most recent one, I don't know if you played it.
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
But Yeah, but really similar, but you can tell it's double A, but you can see that it's almost there, and you want another game from that studio. You want a few games from that studio till you can see that there's talent there, right? You know, when you play a game and you're like, it's double A, and he's onto something here. Let's let these guys cook. And when they did what they did, that hurt the studio. You know what I mean? That almost tanked the studio, and that is where I start to get pissed off about stuff like this. It's like, you know, and that's when you know that these guys are grifters. That's when I'm like, all right, these guys are just full of shit. Like, they're just looking for absolutely anything that they can find for clicks. That's what they're doing. So I guess when I say grifters, like, you know, they might believe this stuff, but they're either so blind and stupid that they don't understand the difference and nuance, or they're doing this on purpose. And I tend to think there's a little bit of both in that side of the community. But look, and I understood your argument with the kids, you know, like, but it's in Avowed. Look, if it's a pronoun in a character creator screen, I don't think your kids are going to focus on that unless you do. Like, you know, right. I just don't think they're going to see that.
You're like, that's what Julie and I, we don't draw attention to this stuff. Like, it's like, because it's same thing within theater. Like, you know, like, if you draw attention to, maybe you made a flub, then the audience knows that something happened, versus if you just, all right, we're just going to roll with it. It ends up being something that never even registers. Wow. Because, like, we all remember back to when we were kids, like, oh yeah, you go look at history and you're like, all this crap was going down. And I was just like, oh, I hate Legos. I'm having fun as a kid, being in my kid world. And that's what it is. And it's like, you know, back to the theater analogy, like, there was this one time, this actress walked out on stage, she fell and got back up and did the scene. The only people who knew that she wasn't supposed to fall were the actors. The audience had no clue. They thought that was just a part of it. And so, yeah, we don't highlight that. We don't highlight any. We're not going to break, you know, we're just going to keep moving on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. More choices in a character creation screen in any RPG feels like a win, almost as a blank check. Like, I have a tough time thinking of anything that you could do to increase the number of choices I have in a character creation screen, and I'm not going to like it. That doesn't mean I'll pick it, but I just like that there's variety. And so if people are like, hey, there's this other variety and 0.5% of the players are going to pick it and they like it, awesome, do it. And in many of these games, like, that's where I'm seeing some of these hyperbolic reviews get hung up on. Like, they're getting 25 seconds into a game and they're making a choice on whether or not they like the next 80 hours of it. And, like, that just feels like, it just feels like going out to dinner with somebody and they're mad about something in the parking lot that happened. Like, somebody cut you off for your parking space and now, like, the entire dinner's ruined. It's like, just get past it. Like, I get it. You can have an opinion, but, like, just get past it. The rest of the game is really good. And if Avowed is good, it'll be a good game. And that's the end of it. I haven't seen any of these games. If they're good, I haven't seen this argument. Where I've seen is when a game fails, is it one of the arguments that's brought up on why? Oh, that's why Concord failed. I don't think that's the only reason Concord struggled.
No, definitely not.
Yeah, I wouldn't back anybody who tried to make the argument that this was the one reason. I think there are multiple factors, right? But, like, the point that I was making is talking also about a pattern, because it isn't actually just about pronouns. What we've seen kind of percolate from that was obviously kind of a match that lit the fire. And you're right, these creators, they jumped on that, but then that had knock-on effects where all of a sudden you start seeing kind of this pattern, which we've seen with these other games that haven't done quite so well, in which that the devs themselves, some of them, not all of them. And I even said in my video, I was like, imagine working on this game, being so excited for it. You've poured your heart into it for 5 years. And then 5 months before it comes out, one of the head developers starts talking about how they don't like white people and they were not going to hire them, and hiring discrimination issues. And it's like, man, how I would be mad. I'd be like, what are you doing? Because one of the factors of not a lot of people that I know, but I've hired people out of game development because it doesn't pay great. and you can get great developers out of the game development world for like the application development world, which pays substantially better. But how they kind of make up that gap is if the game does well, there is that bonus structure that comes out, and it's like, no, like, what are you doing? Like, why have we seen that? And we've seen that pattern happen with multiple games, Veilguard being obviously the most recent, but we've seen that all the way throughout 2024, where I think it's just a human response, a quipped response of, well, if you don't like it, don't play it. This game isn't for you, right? Like, but you make a product to sell a product. It should, in my mind, it's like you want to try and what we've seen with Xbox and Xbox everywhere, like you want to try and reach as many people as possible, because that's just smart. Because especially with the cost of these games, I could tell you right now, Veilguard easily lost $150 million, and that's me being generous. Like that isn't a win. That isn't a win for anybody, and you got to wonder, like, yeah, part of it's marketing, part of it's the economy, part of it's this, but also part of it could be, like you said, did they hire the best? Are they trying to make the best product? And I saw the Earthworm Jim creator, the guy who came out, and he's been making games, and he's gone through like quite a journey that I got caught up on in the last week or two, because he's been publicly talking about it, stating like, yeah, these games, back when we were making these games, you had to be like, in a way, like the cultural shift has happened, because like you had to be conservative, because you're like, we're making a product, we have to make sure that it is financially viable. But we've seen a shift recently where there's so much overhead by these big companies that it's like, yeah, that can be a loss leader. And so they've been more experimental, and I don't think it's been received as well.
I don't think they could afford to do that, dude. Like you're talking about, PlayStation doesn't have too many more failure games in it before it becomes a serious issue.
I agree. Yeah.
Like you.
But PlayStation isn't Microsoft or Amazon. Like there is. Yeah.
There's a big difference, talking about trillions in that space. But and all of these big companies do it, man. They all do it. I work for a huge company, and we do it. I can't say too much about that, but well, for instance, what's another example? Say, for instance, you have a management structure in a company, and that management structure is generally dominated by white men for a multitude of reasons. And there wouldn't just be one reason. It's not just because we are discriminating against women. There would be a multitude of reasons. So you want to sort of even the playing field. So I guess the best way to sort of do that is to train within the company and move people up that you think are and slowly over time do that. But say you realize this in 2021, and then you go, right, by 2025, 50% women in management. What do you have to do to get there? You have to discriminate, and you have to discriminate against people that probably are better for the job. And they might be straight white men. But that's damaging to your business. And I feel like we've seen a lot of that. Like, we have to hit these quotas. There is a way to do quotas, by the way, where it's actually fair. And you would have to do research. And I feel like they don't have a problem doing research because they spend a lot of money on this sort of stuff. So, if you did a bit of research on whatever it is, what demographic you're trying to hire, if you want, you want to get a percentage or a fair percentage that represents the population of whatever demographic it is, let's say women, and you're hiring for, say, I don't know, doctors, right? And then you look at the qualified pool of doctors, and representative in your particular society, say in America, let's say there's 60% men and there's 40% women. Okay, well, then you could have a quota to say, okay, well, there's definitely a big enough talent pool for us to have 60 and 40. You know what I mean? That would make sense. That would be fair. At that point, you would have the applicants coming in, and it would be feasible to look at two resumes and go, hey, these two are both just as good as each other, but this one's a woman and we're going to hire them. It's still a sort of discrimination, but I think it sort of blurs those lines, and it's not bad, right? You can do it like that. Like that's a possibility. Okay.
Well,
if you
especially
wanted to
like
do
in
quotas.
especially in healthcare, like my wife likes to go see women doctors. You know, it's like, yeah, you don't want to sit here like, yeah, discriminating in that regard and say like, oh, okay, we're going to go with the guy every time. Like, yeah, you're going to end up hurting your business, you know.
Yeah, but
in
if
the
you
long
don't
run.
do the research and you don't know what demographic, what percentage of the pool it is, or that demographic that you want to hire, you're going to be hiring people that are not as qualified as people you could have gotten.
Mhm.
And that's just bad. That's just bad for business. That is just bad for your business. That is a bad way to run a business. You end up with a lower skilled workforce. I don't know why they do that. Now, going to the developer, what you were saying about him, he should be out on his ass, flat out. He should have been immediately fired, and we've seen people fired for less. Right now, he
was fired, right?
4 years ago. No, not that I know of.
He's still there. Yeah.
Yeah, he's being supported. And he does sit in on, he's the art director. I think he does sit in on, he would sit in on hiring for that department because he is the director. Right.
I thought he was fired.
I can't remember.
He was
Definitely not fired. I can't remember exactly what he said, but like
he might still at some point be, but as it is December 2024, he's still employed.
He should be fired 100%. And not for the hiring practices though. And I think it's pretty hard to prove discrimination in that space. But I don't think for the hiring practices, but just for the initial comment that he said in response to Elon, at which time he should have just shut the fuck up. Like he should not have said a goddamn thing. And his response was, "Oh, I'm glad that I pissed this guy off. Something little shit, whatever." That's what needs to stop from developers. Like you are representative of an entire company, and probably not that entire company shares your views. You were trying to sell a product to people, and you just alienated half of the country. That is the dumbest move, like in a business that you can make. Like
I don't know why that went away. There was this idea at some point that like coming with a position of leadership came with additional scrutiny. That like if you were going to be in a leadership position in a company or in a country, that FAIR was not treating you equally, that FAIR was holding you to a higher standard than everybody else. And that you're like, well, this nobody said it and they didn't get in trouble. Yes. And they're not you. Like because his words carry weight on behalf of an organization.
Mm-hmm.
They're not just, hey, I have this feeling about a guy I saw on the street and it's an inappropriate feeling and I'm sharing it in a public forum. And we can all decide whether or not we're going to be mad about it as a group. But this is something that like, what level of sway did he have over the hiring? You know, if he was just an employee and he doesn't like another group of people, but can treat them professionally within the workplace, that's a thing. Like there are bigots in the world and they have jobs and they get paid. And as long as they can keep it to themselves, society largely just moves on smoothly. But when you have somebody in a leadership position, you have a chance for those ethics and morals to now become policy, to now become action. And so like, was Matt, you know, I don't know this whole situation. At best I'd heard people were excited about Avowed and it was going to be a fine game and that was going to be the end of it. So when
all the previews,
what do you think? I was like, he goes, what about this Avowed drama? And I was like, what are you talking about? So like, because I don't typically get hyped about games till they come out because there's too many times where I get hyped about a game and then it doesn't come out for 3 freaking years. And it's like, I just can't, I don't have the stamina to be excited that long. So like,
the number of times that I have to talk to people in the comments being like, guys, Chris isn't hating on your game. He just is not going to be excited about it until he can install it. Like he will be even killed. He won't be angry. He will not be happy. He will be Chris. Anyway, continue, Chris.
And so like, so knowing this situation, like, was Matt the primary hiring decision on the team? Like
for the art department, yeah.
Okay. Like how far does that span within the size of like a game studio? Like this is just me asking.
Or it's at the size and scale of this, it would represent a decent chunk of people. Now, not obviously the entire body of it, but like, you know, Brisk It said, it's like you are community, like not everybody on this team shares these views. Not everybody on these teams like have this. And now you're coming out and you're you're actively hurting the entire, like, by taking these stances. Honestly, sometimes, like, let the work speak for itself. Just let the work speak for itself, because if Avowed is good, that's where I get frustrated, especially at the anti-woke, crowd, because it's like this eagerness to label everything as woke and to do that, obviously, so they can remain relevant in the algorithm. Like, I get how the game is played. It's annoying, but I understand it. However, like, I just think that when it's all said and done, have some integrity. Like, legitimately let, as evidence piles up, right? Because it wasn't just the pronouns that kicked it off. It was as all these other things. And then they kept talking and doubling down, that I'm just like, whoo, if the pattern holds, because we saw so much astroturfing around Veilguard, lots of positive reviews. And then when the real reviews came out, it was bad. And then on top of that,
was not, the HR comment was not the only negative thing he said about the game.
No, his review really highlights the contrast of the real positive reviews out there. And then you see them shifting that messaging, going like, oh my gosh, this is a return to form, to like, yeah, like, okay, we're going to distance ourselves from those review scores. It's like, okay.
I have two friends that weird. Veilguard. One says he likes it the longer he plays it. The other said he liked like the first 4 hours, and then it just really kind of churned off. And so, like, it's interesting to hear with Veilguard in particular that the experience just seems to vary so wildly, because these are two friends that I think are typically aligned on games. Mm-hmm. And like they both, and then they're not. So like I don't know what's going on with Veilguard, but it doesn't seem to be the same experience for everybody that downloads it.
Apparently, at the back end of the game, there's something that happens in the last sort of story beat, and it becomes better. That I've heard from like multiple people. So it is coming to Game Pass because it's on EA.
Cool. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me.
Wait, yeah, so it'll be in Game Pass. So EA, if you've got Ultimate, you've got EA Play, which means you'll be able to play it. So for me, I was like, well, look, I'm just going to wait it out till then. I will play it to see, what it was all about, because apparently combat's really good. But that's the thing. You think about those game designers, those animators and all that, and they've put all this work in, and then the story writers who really aren't the technically skilled. Sorry to any story writers out there. When I say technically skilled, you've got skills, they're just not technical. They're not the technically skilled people that go to, some of them go to university. That's not true either. But you know what I mean, right?
All these guys ruined it for other groups of people that are totally unrelated.
Yeah, exactly that. And it's just, I would imagine, as a, and through no fault of their own, and now maybe their jobs are at risk. Do you know what I mean? Like they've done a really good job. The combat's amazing. Everything about the game is amazing. But because of the really poor writing, and because of that stupid scene, which apparently is just one scene, and that's fine. But because of that stupid scene, the poor writing, and it's what I call shoehorning shit in. Like it's almost smuggling. It's not even smuggling, really. You're basically writing with that shit on a flag as you come pull into the port. You know what I mean? Like that is just bad. But the Avowed director, this is what these devs need to stop doing. Like, if they're going to smuggle this shit in some circumstances, I'm like, fine. Like, if you're having pronouns at the character creator, that's not really smuggling. You're just adding something to a character. If you've got chest scar, right? Because that was in Veilguard, like, because you've had something removed. And I was a little bit like, to that one, I was like, but
especially
look,
in a world of Magic, because that's where I start to like cognitive dissonance in my own mind. It's like, you have a world of Magic of shapeshifting and all of these things. Why are we bringing in that real world aspect when you literally have magic?
And who's going to go under the knife in that particular setting? Like, they didn't even have anesthetic, and they didn't have good antibodies. What's the word I'm thinking of?
Yeah,
antibiotics. They didn't have good antibiotics. Like, I don't know. I don't know. It was just, but then people like, it's fantasy, they can do whatever. I'm like, cool. Like, but it is a bit weird. Like,
I still feel the same way. Just make two. Just, if that's a problem, why aren't there 200 scar types? Like, more covers this up.
Yes.
Like if you're trying to cater to a specific group, cater to all of the groups. More. Like a character creation screen with 600 choices. Like, that's what I want.
Yeah. Like I'm missing an arm, or I'm missing a leg, and
theirs isn't in the 12, or that somebody else's is in the 12. But when it's there's 50 billion possibilities out of our character creator. And you're like, well, I'm really mad that my friend's uncle's aunt's friend from work came up with this one. I don't care. Like, I don't care.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah.
More inclusion. There is an uncanny valley there where if you start including things that break the context, as somebody that plays Final Fantasy 14 as a metallic blue pig, I have to assume that people are on their first story playthrough and get me in a dungeon. Their immersion is a little bit shattered. Like that's me. I did that. But the answer is to just push to the other side and just say, okay, well, let's just make this even more whatever you want to be.
No, agreed. But it wasn't a deal breaker for me either. It wasn't like, but you do in your head, you go, what's this going to be like? And look, Spider-Man 2. There was some stuff in that. I was like, oh my God, why are we doing this? Why am I doing this? Why is this a side mission? Like, why? It doesn't make sense in the context of the game that I'm playing. So there was a side mission where you had to, and look, my son's LGBTQ. I don't know all the letters. I am sorry. So, but like, I'm old, it just used to be, 2 words, and then you could, I don't even know if you're allowed to say those words anymore. Jeez. So anyway, there was a mission in that where one dude wanted to ask out another dude to the prom, and then you got to like link these screens with your electric webs to fire up the screens so he can ask him on the screen. And it's not a big thing, but I was just like, why am I doing this? This is not a superhero thing to do. Like, I'm not saving someone. I'm not gathering information. I'm not doing anything that like a superhero would do. I'm helping a dude ask his.
Yeah, I'd rather you lean all the way in, right? Like the guy you asked to the prom is being bullied by some other kids that don't tolerate that, and you're going to go stop the bullying. Like that's like a real thing that superheroes do. Like, let's lean all the way in, all the way in.
Cool. That would have been cool. I actually wouldn't mind that.
Let's just.
And then the other thing was, like, Mary Jane took a punch from Venom, like to the face, hit a fridge, and then got back up like nothing happened. And then like
I wouldn't get up from that.
and then the whole time she's like goes into the bad thing. She's like berating and talking down to Spider-Man through the entire sequence, and it's like with all this like this typical stuff, and it's just like, oh God.
I think I hit my head on the fridge the other day, digging something from under it, and I don't think I got back up right away. Like, it's
exactly.
my own.
Like no normal humans getting up from that punch. They just basically turned her into a complete beast, and I didn't notice this. I didn't notice this, but I don't know if you know one of my panel members, Infinite Umbra, but he pointed this out, and he's a massive fan of Spider-Man. He pointed out that they basically what's the word, denigrated or tried to make Spider-Man weaker so that they could bring up Miles and Mary Jane, which when I was playing it, because he told me that before I played it, and I'm like, okay, I'll check her out, and maybe it's that bias and I'm just confirming it, but he's right. Like the whole time, Spider-Man seemed like either he was being a knob, or he was weak, or like he didn't save the day, and it was always Miles and Mary Jane that saved the day. And it's like, is this Spider-Man 2, or is it Mary Jane Miles 2? I mean, yeah, Miles is Spider-Man as well, but
yeah,
but
I think Miles is a great character too. Like
he's great.
Like a wicked.
My son prefers Miles over traditional Spider-Man, so I'm like, yeah, let's go with it.
The two I can't remember what they're called.
Animated
Spider-Verse.
Movies?
Oh
yes, so
good.
Well, that's the team. Like, a little bit of a side. Like, why can't that team be in charge of the Sony Spider-Verse whole thing? Because that team knocking it out of the park. Let's put them in charge. What is going on with Craven and with Morbius? And why are we doing? You're actively hurting the Spider-Man brand with these. Like, come on, Sony.
With this rubbish. Yeah, stop it. But you also in the game, back to the game, you don't need to push Spider-Man down to raise the other two up. you can do that in this is the thing, and one of my other friends, Everborn, would say, like, is it this the problem, or is the problem that there's just bad writing?
I think it's bad writing.
Yeah, it is, but you can see it's because the writing is like, listen, if you want to smuggle in your ideologies, and I would argue that Spider-Man 2 had smuggling, because like you could have I wasn't on the lookout for it. So what's the word? I don't know if you could have missed that, but I think some people could have missed that was going on, right? They were just happily playing their game, didn't worry about it. And I had a few things that was sort of confronting where I was like, huh? This is weird. And I think you could write it in such a way, like you just said, like, why didn't he have it, someone's not putting up with that and Spider-Man's going to go in and beat him up. But you know what I mean? Like, why couldn't the story make sense? So I think in some regard, yes, it's bad story writing because they haven't been able to smuggle in their ideology stuff. But also, I think because they're focusing on trying to get that in, they can't figure out a clever way to get it in. I think it's a little bit of both. You know what I mean? And I also think it's, your hiring practices, man. Like if you're hiring people that they would be looking for those specific political beliefs, I believe. Like, I don't know what the interviews are like, but they would be. How do you accidentally hire all these people that have these particular views all the time? How does that happen?
It's a generational thing, right? Like you called it spot on, American communism, and you have just a whole generation of people coming into the workforce that have been, kind of educated in some of that worldview. Like my co-host Kirk, like that's his worldview. Like, and for me, I'm like, all right, that's good to know. But we've gone back and forth on several different topics with it. So I think that's one aspect. I think the other aspect though is like there was a time where this was a really smart strategy, like putting in these things, whether they were smuggling or they're kind of the forefront. And I think we've seen that kind of time come and go in terms of it. So we've seen like a big shift over the last couple of years of people going like, I'm kind of tired of this. Like, I'm kind of just like, and honestly,
I just want a good video game.
Right. But then I also make the argument, like, isn't that also true equality when we're just like, like we're not trying to stop you, but we're not going to like, yeah.
Right. We had a guest on a while back that asked me if I believed in kind of slippery slope. And in the moment, in the middle of the heated argument, I couldn't come up with like a cohesive kind of response to that. And as I thought about it more and as it stuck with me, I realized like it's iterative. It's not a slippery slope, because if it was a slippery slope, once you get sliding to a certain speed, there's no climbing back up. You will hit the end goal. You will continue to slide and slide and slide. And that's not what's happening here. It's iterative. We are making a choice to engage in a certain behavior. And then based on the outcome of that behavior, we're making another choice. And so I think as these studios start to, as when they first were like, wow, I can put $100 million into a game and make 300 million. I can put 300 million into a game and make $1 billion. They kept writing those checks. But when it started being, I can put $300 million into a game and I can get back 100 after waiting 5 years. Like I think a couple iterations after that, somebody will have done the math. Because as you said, like Sony cannot afford an unlimited number of these. Everybody can make mistakes. They're trying to predict the market 2, 3, 5 years out. So you're going to have some mistakes in the batch where you said, hey, we thought this would be the type of game that people wanted. By the time it got here, it wasn't. But if you start to link, hey, we have certain departments we've created, we have certain hiring practices we've encouraged, and those have resulted in good things, that'll continue. Those have resulted in bad things, that'll stop. That's why I thought, I just assumed off the top of this that Matt Hansen was fired. That just felt like art direction's basically done at this stage in the game. That's a fireable offense. Like,
and it would. This is the thing. It would be had you said something from the opposite side, which is also, I think, unfair.
Not
if you're on the opposite. If you had gone the other way, it would be a fireable offense. I see, and I don't see any difference. Like if you are discriminating or being discriminatory or using discriminatory language against any, doesn't matter what skin color it is, against any skin color, you should then be fired. You are representing the company, and what that represents to me is that if they don't fire him, that they hold those views. I think, which is not true.
Racism specifically is the most dumbest economic, diseases of the heart that there has ever been. Like, why? Like, get the right people. Like, merit. in that regards. And then I think essentially, because you brought up DEI earlier, it's like the problem with DEI, and I've seen even people in chat saying like, that's never, true communism has never been tried. It never can be, because human beings are flawed, and it's in our flawed nature.
Yes, it has, though.
True communism. Oh, that I would say yes. The communism in and of itself has been tried, because there can't be a truer form. Humanity is flawed.
It's been tried multiple times.
Yeah,
people who say that have done absolutely no study into the topic, and this is the problem. This is the problem with, like, we know where the problems begin with the right. You hit fascism, you start to have some problems. You know what I mean? Next thing you know, you're gassing people. Then but people don't seem to know where the limit is on the left. And it's a lack of education. It really, really is. And it's not to say people are stupid, but they're just not educating themselves. Like, you've had the Gulag, you've had Mao, you've had millions, billions of people murdered and killed because of communism. You only have to listen to people that have come out of countries like that, the Eastern Bloc countries, and the stories that they can tell you. Like, you're told what to think, you're told what to say. You've got to be careful what you say in your own house. Like, people who say that have not done any research and have no idea about what they're talking about. And when,
I agree, but when they say that, what they like, because you're right, they haven't done the research, but what they say is that regards, like, on paper, like, yeah, like DEI on paper, like, yeah, that's what we want. We want how do we make a more opportunity driven world for people who've been disenfranchised and who maybe not have had the same opportunities. Like, I am all on board on that, and I've stated that multiple times.
Yes.
So that's what that phrase means. When I hear people say that, they're like, that's why I always respond. It's like, yeah, it can never achieve that, what people might try and define as the true definition of it, because humanity is not capable of actually, taking this really good idea on paper and executing it to perfection.
Well, look, I'm a communist at home. Like, I'm a complete communist at home. Like, I look after my family. We share everything that we get. You know what I mean? Like, I am the dictator. I run that house, like, with an iron fist. No, I don't. Like, if people mess up, they get put in the gulag, and I may or may not kill them. No, I don't. Not true. But like, everyone lives in a communist society in their own house, like, because you share everything you make, and that is the truest form of communist. When you try to expand that out, there's less care. It's when you try to expand, like, I care about my missus. I care about my children. I care about my brother. I care about my dad. I care about my mom. Not so much her. But I care about, those people who are mostly close to me, right? When you start to expand that out to, to my friends, I care about them. You expand that out to strangers, and then you expand that out to multiple strangers. Like, it's just not a scalable philosophy. It does not work, because the human condition we can only care so much about so many things and so many people. And it is just not possible to effect communism on a wide scale. It's just not possible. And I don't understand people who don't have the wherewithal to look at history and go, it clearly does not work. It clearly just does not work.
I read his comment wrong too, and that made me chuckle, because I read it as dictator at home and gentleman in the sheets. It's like, oh, that's too good, too freaking good, man. Oh wow, we got ourselves a super chat. I'm going to go ahead and jump in on this one. Mr. Worldwide Warrior Light says, I get the feeling this woke trend is likely trying to correct the big man upstairs. God doesn't make mistakes, we do. And this woke apocalypse is a war with the norm to try and their best to make us wrong or God wrong. Thank you so much for that super chat. You guys, anybody panel here want to make any comment on that?
Well, look, I'm agnostic, so I'm open to the idea. What I did, unfortunately, God got brought into these politics, dude, and I just don't think that we need to be adding religion into this culture wars at the same time. which is
I think it's all like I have to
madness.
use religious words. Like I have to use that because like when you see the left, they excommunicate you if you do not adhere to this, to this rigid, definition of, of what people refer to as the message. And I'm like, I got to use religious terms because like that's the only way my mind can understand how somebody, that far left or even to a degree that far right thinks and processes. Because it's like, oh, it's faith-based.
Religions don't. Yeah, it's faith-based, I guess. But religions, not all religions, some. But not religions generally don't excommunicate you if you are straying from the path. You're not immediately out, right? And I don't have a huge amount. I'm not religious, so I don't have a huge amount of experience with religiosity. But from what I've seen, I don't see people. If someone's going the wrong way and they're within a church, the church is going to try their best to help them. Do you know what I mean? They're not going to just boot them out the door. Whereas I think the left does that. So, but there is faiths that do that, and then will actively try to kill you if you do leave the faith. So there is that too. So I guess there's room in that to ruminate.
Yeah. The note of like, how they kick you out right away. It's like, that's one of the greatest comic memes I've seen in 2024, where it's like, all of a sudden it's like, why are you all supporting the other side? It's like, you literally kicked out everybody that was on your team. And then all of a sudden you realize your team's incredibly small and everybody is over here going like, yeah, we don't all agree on everything, but we definitely agree that we don't like this thing now. So like in a way I see it as a self-fulfilling prophecy and in a way like a diminishing one at that, because I guess like would you think we've passed this peak wokeness, this peak American communist export?
I really hope. I just look. I think my biggest fear is now that we're overcorrecting back the other way.
Yes.
Because that does not end up in a good place either.
Correct.
Somewhere in the middle, and someone said to me, it's become a bit of a right leaning dog whistle is free speech, and I'm like, you cannot. No. Free speech is what gives us the ability to correct when we have these problems. If we end up in a place where we're starting to look down the barrel of gulag, or we're starting to look down the barrel of fascism, or whatever it is, free speech is the thing that can bring us back from the brink. That is the check and the balance for our society. And someone able to stand up and say the unpopular thing at the right time, and build a movement to correct us, which I believe is happening. And that's, that as long as we still have free speech in the West, there's hope. When you look at the UK and what's going on over there, people being arrested for social media posts and for things that they've said that are being, the problem with hate speech in Australia has hate speech laws too. And I abhor, there's speech that I find disgusting. However, it's who decides what that is. Where is that line? Who decides what hate speech is? And if that line starts to come closer and closer, and the Overton window shifts to a point where these are the only things you're allowed to say, that's not a free society. And we can end up in a very, very bad place. And we've seen that. So do I think that we've sort of hit that peak American communism? I think so. But my concern is that we're also gonna shift back the other way. But I think the best thing is what's happening now is the new media, because I believe the media has failed us. Traditional media has failed us, and I think the rise of people who are unable to be cancelled from, kicked out from these institutions, still have a voice. Then I think Western society is got a good shot. But I think if we continued down that path, we would have ended up in a very, very bad place. As soon as you start grouping identities, and then you start offering identities more than other identities because of their identity, what you create is animosity. And all that happens is what we're seeing it now. Like, this is part of what this is. The animosity has grown to a point where people are tired of it and they're fighting back. And the tendency is to overcorrect. And just the hope is that people listen to voices of reason, and we get to a point in the center where we need to be, where we do have, diversity, equity, and inclusion in its truest sense, where we truly are diverse. We truly are giving people, equal opportunity. And we truly are inclusive. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But excluding people because their color or their skin on either side, it doesn't matter who it is wrong.
It's interesting to me because a lot of this I see kicking off actually with the Occupy Wall Street movement back in the day, because it was the phrase was we are the 99% versus the 1%. That's class. That's class warfare. Like, here are the elites, the establishment, and here's everybody else who's getting screwed over. From that point, though, you actually see kind of them kick it over into identity. Like, that's really where you see the birth of the identity politics movement in such a degree, because it gets us all fighting each other based off of our identity groups. And guess what happens? The world, just like the elites and all of them, they're all just sitting back and profiting the entire time. So it's like, I think it's important to get away from that and focus in on that. Yeah. Focusing on what can we do from a class perspective? How can we help, the lower class, the middle class truly have the life they want? I was talking to my dad about it this last weekend. And I was like, because he did really well. I grew up and we wanted for nothing, and then eventually we lost our everything due to a big pharma thing. So I have huge opinions about how both the positive and negative within that industry, based off of my own personal experience of watching what happened to my dad through my own eyes. But we were really well off prior to that. And I go, Dad, in order for me to be as well off as you were, I would have to be making $300,000 to $400,000 a year minimum. Like, that's what I would need. And I'm like, I'm not, I'm nowhere in that ballpark, and I was like, that's the difference. Like, what you got to experience at that, you could go on vacations. You could afford like healthcare. You could afford these things. It's like, okay, I have to make a lot of sacrifices just to be where I'm at. And it's like, I'm not complaining about my hand in life. I've been very blessed. I got a family that loves me, and it's like I am doing fine by all measures. But like, there is a massive shift, and I do understand the frustration. And I've just seen a generation run into that when they can't buy a house, when they're leaving school with hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt and no real way to pay that off in any kind of short-term, kind of goal that keeps them out of being able to buy a house, that keeps them out of having a family. And so it is a recipe of, you're kind of just heating up the pot and waiting to see what, where the steam gets released. And unfortunately, when that does happen, I don't think it's pretty for anybody.
Well, as a politician, it's strange. If I was a politician, I would be focusing on the larger segments of the population, and that has traditionally been middle class or middle class, lower class, right? And seeing what opportunities you can create to give those people opportunities to live. Not everyone's going to be a superstar, not everyone's going to be a millionaire, but people just want to live a nice, comfortable as possible life, and have the basics that they want. I make a really good wage, and things have gotten a lot tighter for me, like where I'm like, where's all this money going? I used to have more. Why do I have less? What's going on here? Like, it's actually become noticeable. It's taken a while to hit us in Australia, but it's become super noticeable. So yeah, I think politicians just need to focus on what works for the economy and what works for not looking at what skin color people have, but look at what works for the different class base. Like you said, like, hey, what works for the middle class? What can we do to help them? What can we do to help the working class? Can we, I'm all for raising the minimum wage over there. I think you should. But that's a knock-on effect. Something else will happen, and you need to account for that. That money needs to come from somewhere. You can't just you can't print money, which was stupid. You can't just pull that money from nowhere. So, they need to start coming up with actual plans to get themselves out of debt, but also help the people at the same time, in the classes that are going to vote for them. That's who votes for you. That's who gets out and puts those ballots in.
I think if we could get rid of corporate socialism, that would be a huge win. And what I mean by that is that we see these corporations being, like, back to 2008, for example, living through that experience where they're incentivized to be as risky and ballsy as they possibly can be. And when everything falls out from under them, they get bailed out by the government, as opposed to like nobody went to jail, like, okay, wait, but if I don't pay my bills, I'm out on the street. It's like, why are we having this, this socialism for these multi-billion-dollar corporations? And I think that would be something I would easily rally behind as well. Now, Chris, we've been back and forth with me and Brisk It, but I'd like to give you the opportunity to have a kind of a final thought before we wrap up the show today.
No, I'm pretty much out of time. I have somewhere I got to be, so we're about an hour over.
I apologize. It's a good conversation.
It could take a deep, different turn, and I'd love to have it. I just don't have anything else. I hope Avowed's a good game, and I hope that we can stay away from all this. And so, like the super chat and stuff, starting to talk about bringing in religion. Like, I don't think this situation needs more controversy. Like, I don't think if we don't want sexuality and race in games, I don't think we want religion in games. I don't think, I just want the game to be fun to play. And that should be the end of it. Like, I don't need my politics in my games. I don't need to be told to feel morally in a game. I don't need a game to tell me who to believe in or anything like that. I just want a game to be fun to play.
Yeah, agreed. I think that wraps it up well. Yeah, 100%.
Well, Brisk It, thank you guys for joining. Chris, thanks. I know we ran a little long, and hopefully you have a great rest of your day. Guys, be sure to go follow the Infinite podcast as well. You mentioned Umbra. We've had Umbra on here. Awesome content creator, awesome guy. And so, yeah, but your panel and your show is really top notch, and appreciate you making time, especially it's so early for you in Australia. So we do appreciate that. Guys, be sure to go follow him, and we'll hopefully see you guys back here next week, where we're going to be doing our final show of the year before we wrap up for the Christmas holidays and whatnot. But anyway, until next week, guys, take care.